Well, overnight, Israel launched a special forces operation which freed 2 Israeli hostages in Rafah. Well, local health officials say 37 people were killed and dozens others were wounded in the southern Gaza city.
This comes after British MPs warned an Israeli invasion of the southern city of Rafah would be catastrophic for civilians.
Well, let's speak now to journalist Jotam Confino, who joins us live now from Israel. And Jotam, what's your reaction to what we're seeing or about to see happen in Rafah?
Well, first of all, like you said, it is a waiting disaster. Unless these 1.3 million civilians can somehow be evacuated to other areas in Gaza, that will be more safe. They won't be good places to go because northern Gaza, for example, is in rubbles. Central Gaza is also not safe. So there aren't really any good places for them to go, which means that, like you said, it will be a disaster one way or another. But what we can't forget is that Israel expects that most of the remaining 134 hostages are in southern Gaza, and particularly in Rafah, which means that this operation, this war, cannot end if Israel does not go in there and at least try to get them out, either by force or in a deal with Hamas. We saw 2 of them rescued yesterday or last night from Rafah. And Israel will, of course, continue to try and locate these remaining hostages, 50 of whom, by the way, are presumed dead, according to American media. So it's an impossible situation, and we knew this was coming. Rafah is another Hamas stronghold. It's impossible to win the war against Hamas if you don't eradicate them from Rafah. So it's an impossible situation, one way or another.
It sounds impossible also, Jotam, to rescue the remaining 75. I mean, one wonders how they actually go about that without giving Hamas warning that they're coming.
Exactly. What we saw last night was a spectacular rescue operation, really. Both the army and special forces, everyone really came together to get these 2 hostages out, which were guarded by Hamas terrorists, but apparently they were in a civilian apartment. Now, this is just one of 2 successful rescue operations since the beginning of the war. We've seen failed operations where hostages were killed. Hostages have apparently also been killed in Israeli airstrikes. So to assume that the remaining, 74 hostages can come out alive, I think is still naive. Of course, this is really good news that 2 of them were brought out alive, but the remaining hostages, some of whom are deep underground, I don't think they'll come out unless there is a deal between Hamas and Israel. And there are still significant gaps remaining between Hamas and Israel right now. Hamas would like to, of course, continue to rule Gaza. They would like to have more aid in. They would like to have Israel withdraw completely from Gaza. And Israel will, of course, not accept that. So unless one part compromises, there will be no hostage deal.
And could there be a deal between Israel and the rest of the world over what else they're doing in Gaza? Because they don't seem to be listening to any influences in the world.
They're listening to the United States. I think we have to remember that from the beginning of the war, Israel's initial stance on Gaza was that there would be no electricity, no water, no food coming into Gaza whatsoever. Now, all of that has, of course, significantly changed. There's more aid coming in now than at any point during the war. And this is only due to U.S. pressure. Now, the United States is pressuring Israel to withhold this offensive in Rafah. They are constantly telling them, you need to wait until as many civilians as possible are safe. So there's a constant kind of power battle between Netanyahu, the prime minister, and Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is obviously under a lot of pressure at home because of his support for Israel. But I don't think that you will see an international pressure resulting in Israel saying, all right, we won't go into Rafah, despite the hostages being there. Only a hostage deal can prevent Israel from going into Rafah.
And Netanyahu's under pressure at home as well, I'm sure, to get those hostages back home safe. And then he's also got the international pressures of great concern about an operation in Rafah. It must be quite difficult balance for him to strike.
Yeah, one can only really speculate how a 73-year-old man who's been in power for so long can really withstand this pressure. It's enormous. It's more pressure than he's been under in his entire career. And that's not to say, that's not to put it mildly, really. He is obviously under pressure, not only because the Israelis are demonstrating all across the country, they're sleeping outside of his house, they're calling for his ouster, the polls are against him, but also because the world is starting to turn against him. The world is starting to see that Netanyahu is obviously trying to stay in power. He's doing everything he can to politically survive this disaster. And he's been criticized for not compromising on this hostage deal, that he's simply not allowing Hamas to win this game, which can sound a bit morbid in a way, because of course he shouldn't allow Hamas to win. That's not the point. The point is that if you want these hostages out, you can't have it both ways. Total victory is an illusion. He continues to repeat this total victory goal, which is to eradicate Hamas and get all the hostages out. Now, those two things are impossible. You need to compromise on one of those two goals.